Okay, I think I'm ready. We're coming towards the end of 2020. And it's been a terrific year. We've been talking about that. We've said that a few times. This has been the year where, goodness sakes, quite a few things have really impinged on Islam. We've talked about the problems with the emergence of Islam, the historical problems with the 7th century. But probably the biggest thing that's come down the pike this year has been the Qira'at. These things, these books right up here. These are 9 of the 30 that are officially considered to be official by Muslim scholars today. And that infamous interview that we had on June 8th between Muhammad Hijab and Yasir Qadhi, we've talked about it over and over again. And all the time that we have talked about it, I've been waiting for someone to come up with some type of rebuttal and with the material that we're coming up with. And the only rebuttal so far has been, Jay, you don't know your Arabic. Jay, you don't understand this thing. Jay, this, Jay, that. It's all been ad hominem against me, my person. And I've not really seen anybody that's put any claims. Even Yasir Qadhi, with his meltdown that happened on November 26th, Thanksgiving morning, didn't really engage with anything that I'd said. He just went to 2 videos that had nothing really to do with the Qira'at, other than the fact that I was referring to at one point, I was referring to the 29 other Qira'ats that disagreed with the Hafs that were thrown into the Nile, and made a big point of, Jay, how could all the Qurans, other Qurans in the world fit into the Nile, as if that's what I was saying. In fact, we were making a joke about that very thing. Did they think that because they threw all these high school students, 29 Qira'ats from the high school students, did they think they could destroy all the Qurans? Now, so I've been waiting for a good response, and I still haven't found one. But what I'm going to do, since we're almost ending the year, I'm going to go back to one that did come down the pike a few days ago from a friend of mine in Africa, from one of his friends who did a whole study, I understand, on the Qira'at, trying to answer me, and spent much of the time just throwing lots of vitriol at me, much like Yasir Qadhi. So I'm not even going to name him because it's not important. I don't think he needs to have any name. I don't deal with anybody that just sits and mocks me. If they're going to mock me, then why engage with them? But I want to go and I want to engage with some of the things that had come out of his meetings, and also others that have brought up, because I think you all need to be aware of how people are going to respond. And let me just go ahead. I've taken, I think, 25 different points that I would like to bring up, 25 different ideas that I'd like to engage with concerning the difficulties for Muslims. And I can see why. It's difficult for them to respond to the different qira'ats, these different derivations of the Quran, 9 of which I have here. I don't know how I would be able to do it in their place. So let's go through some of these that have come up, and I'll be moving them around. I'll be putting them into categories, and I'll try to respond to them as we go. The first thing that comes up, and this is you'll hear this from a lot of Muslims. Yasir Qadhi used to say this all the time, that there are 10 different recognized schools of Qira'at. There are 10. And the 10 he's referring to are these 10 right here. I'll put this up on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Look at this. You can see it there. Can you see on the left side? Look on the left side and look at the green names. These are the readers. Those are the first 7. Those are the ones that Ibn Majah chose. So that's Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr, Ibn Amir, Asim, Hamza, Al-Kasai. Those are the 7, the green ones that you see there, chosen by Ibn Majah in 936. So you have that in front of you. Now look below that, and now let's go back to the 3 below that in red. Abu Ja'far and Yaqub al-Yamani and Khalaf. Excuse me for my Arabic. I know a lot of people mock me for my Arabic. I have an accent, and I'm not going to be able to read it as good as Al-Fadi reads, and it would be great if he were here, he could read it for me. But those were chosen by Al-Jazari in 1429. Look at the date, 1429. So we're talking about the 15th century. That is 800 years later that another 3 were chosen. And you add those 7 plus 3, the green and the red, and you get 10. And that's the 10 that they're all talking about. And it comes up over and over again. I hear about these 10, about these 7, about the 3, about the 10. These are the 10, the creme de la creme that Yasir Qadhi used to talk about, the best of the best, he used to say. I wonder, I'm still sure he still says that today. And he would say that there is not any difference in any words or letters between these 10. And yet it's fascinating to me. He's not responded to that. I'd like to know if he still says that. I'd like to know if any of these Muslims still say that these 10 that we're looking at, the 7 green and the 3 red, are there any differences? So they talk about these 10. That's the first problem. Second thing they go into is that they were approved, and this is what comes up. They said that they were approved by Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid. No, they were not. Only 7 were approved by Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid. The other 3, as I've just showed you, you can see it right there, were approved by Al-Jazari in 1429. 800 years later. So when Muslims say that, hold them, hammer them on that and say, stop, either you don't understand, or you're just being confused, or you're just running it together and you're not thinking it through. If you're going to talk about the 10, then you've got to choose the first 7 and the next 3. The first 7 and the next 3. And they don't do that. They just say 10 without thinking about it, without realizing that these 10 were finally chosen by Al-Jazari in 1429. The only first 7 were chosen in 936. And that in and of itself is a problem when you stop and think about it, because 936, they were chosen 300 years after Muhammad. So these were not chosen by Muhammad. These were not chosen by Uthman. These were not chosen by anybody in the 7th century. They were chosen in the 10th century and the 15th century, 300 years after Muhammad and 800 years after Muhammad. Are you getting that? I'm going to keep dribbling this home because Muslims won't tell you this. I'm telling you this. So this is hundreds and hundreds of years, 800 years after the fact that these now first 7 and the next 3. Now notice, I just went through those names. Let's go put it up again. I went through those names. Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Abu Mir. I'm going to repeat them again. Take a look. Do you see Hafs' name there? The Quran that we're using today, this one here, this is Hafs. This is the Quran that everybody uses. Well, 93% of the Muslim world, or 95% as some say, 95% of the Muslim world uses. Is that in those 10? And see, this is another big lie that Muslims aren't admitting to, including this fellow that did these set of talks. He's not admitting that the Hafs is not part of that 10. You need to make sure that Muslims admit that. You need to make sure they go. Now, what they do and what they say is that of these 10, really there are only 5 that are very popular today. And I've got all 5 of them here. So let's go through them. The most popular, of course, is Hafs. This one, 95% of the Muslim world follows that. Then comes Warsh, which is this one right here. This is Warsh. And this one is very popular in Algeria, Morocco, parts of Tunisia, West Africa, and Sudan, basically North Africa. This is popular amongst 3% of the Muslim world. Okay, so 3%, 95% for Hafs, 3% for this one. The next one that's most is this one here, which is really the earliest one. This is the earliest one. This is Ibn Amir. Ibn Amir is very popular in parts of Yemen, and that's 1% of the Muslim world. So 1% for this guy. And he wrote his in 736, over 100 years after Muhammad. So this is the earliest. This is the very beginning of all the qira'ats, of all the different readings. So that's for 1%. Then you have 0.7% are Qalun. Qalun would be this guy right here. This is Qalun, and he died in 835. He died in the 9th century. 9th century, 835, about 100 years before he was chosen. Well, actually, he wasn't chosen by Ibn Mujahid. He was chosen by Al-Shatibi. Shatibi didn't choose him until the 12th century, 1194. But anyways, 0.7% of the Muslim world follows his reading, and then you have Al-Duri. Here's Al-Duri. Al-Duri is only really followed or memorized by people from parts of Sudan and West Africa, again in Africa again. So those are the ones that make up basically 100% of the Muslims today. Now, why then are these others printed? Well, there are people here and there, families here and there that still memorize Ibn Kathir or Al-Kasai or Khalaf or Shobab, and they're all 30 are being memorized by someone somewhere in the world. So you cannot throw them out, or you don't want to throw them into the Nile anymore, because there are still people who memorize them, and they all are different. Our team in London has found 93,000 differences. 93,000 differences between these different qira'at. But nonetheless, you need to know this. You need to be aware of the fact that there are more than just one Quran that is being memorized around the world. There are 30 of them. And the Hafs, this little guy here, is the most popular. And we'll get into that as to why he's a little popular. Now, one of the things that they'll want to do is they'll say these differences are nothing more than dots and vowels. How many times have I said that? Have I not said that these differences are dots and vowels? Dots and vowels. 5 dots, known as the itjam. The itjam would be the 5 dots. And then the harakat would be with the vowels. 3 vowels. The dhamma, which is the oo sound, little curlicue above the letter. The fatha, which would be the ah sound, just a slash above the letter. And then you have the kasra, which is the e sound below the letters. Dhamma, fatha, kasra. 2 above, 1 below. 3 vowels, 5 dots. Those are what makes the difference. Now, this person that had this this whole talk, he goes on and he says that these variations among the qira'at tend to involve only the harakat, only the vowels. No, they do not. Let me just give you some examples. And this is something I get a lot of Muslims I don't know why they say that, because let me give you, here's some examples right here. I just went back, listen, we've put together about 70 of these examples. Hatun and I held them up actually at Speaker's Corner 4 years ago, and then we did a whole session just looking at the differences. And you know, when we held them up, the Muslims tried to grab them out of our hands and tear them, so we had to laminate them so you couldn't tear them. But that's the difficulty. They don't want to see this. They don't want you to know this. And that's because they haven't been told this. And even these people who are doing these talks think they know everything, and they give me, and they just go on and on about how stupid I am. But stop, I'm just going to, since I am such an idiot from their standards, let's just look and see if these all include just vowelization. Here's one example here. Surah 2, Ayah 58. Take a look at this. Here's Surah 2, Ayah 58. And there you see on the left is the Hafs. The Hafs is the one that's known by or used by 95% of the world. Do you notice the word naghfiru, which means shall forgive? And then look on the right and you see in the gold there, or the orange, Warsh. That's the Warsh. That's the one that's used by a good 3% of the world, of people in all of North Africa, and that's yugfaru. So naghfaru is a noon, and yugfaru is a ya. Take a look. 1 dot above for nag and 2 dots below. So those are dots. That's ijams. Those are not harakat. So there is, I've just disputed that. Let's take a look at another one. Here's another one here. And in this case, this is Surah 2, Ayah 140. Here's Surah 2, Ayah 140. And on the left is the takuluna, which means you say. And you notice it is a ta, which is like a T, equivalent to our T. It has 2 dots above it. If you look at the little green slash there. The Warsh, if you notice, it's yakuluna, they say. So it's been changed from you say, second person singular, to they say, third person plural. And there's no vowelization difference there. That is a ijam, which means a dot. 2 dots are either above or 2 dots below. So what's this notion that this is only vowels? These aren't vowels at all. These are dots differences. I'm just giving you some examples. I could give you many, but I'm just doing this because I don't want to waste a lot of your time. Here's chapter 2, verse 219. On the left, you see kabirun, which is great. And you can see the ba. There is the B. Look at the arrow pointing to the B there. Can you see it there with the dot below? On the right side is the what? It's kathirun. Notice it has 3 dots above. Not 1 dot below, it has 3 dots above. There's the TH sound, which means plenty. So, is drinking wine and gambling a great sin? That is kabirun. Or is it plenty of sin, which would be kathirun? So it does change the meaning, and it also changes the context. So you can see these do change it. But this is not vowelization here. These are absolutely, these actually are dots that change the meaning of the text. Here, this is my last one I'm going to put up there, because I just wanted to use some from Surah 2. I'm just going to one Surah, and I'm just looking at the Hafs and the Warsh. I'm not looking at all the other 28. I'm just looking at these 2, because these are the 2 most popular. One is 95% popular. That's the Hafs on the left. And the other is only 3% popular. That's the Warsh on the right. So here's another one. Yukafiru. You, that's with a Y. There's the 2 dots below there. Can you see the arrows pointing to he? Versus the Warsh, which is nukafiru, which is 1 dot above. We. So, and he will remove or expiate for you some of your misdeeds, or when we will remove. So, does Allah remove our misdeeds, or do we remove our own misdeeds? Can we, either this is Allah plural or humans, or do what is reserved for Allah to do? So therefore, you can see this could be a whole theological problem, just depending on where you put the dots. So dots do also do the damage. Dots damage. Dots damage. And here's a case where dots do damage. Dots do damage, dummy. And so can you understand why we're doing this? And this is the difficulty why a lot of Muslims have not looked at these examples. Maybe we need to put more examples of them. Listen, Hutton and I did this 4 years ago, and we can certainly bring them back again, and you can go and look at it yourself. But that is a claim that is made that I think a lot of Muslims need to be careful of. They're making claims that they cannot support. Let's move on to then number 5. Here is a claim that it comes up, and I got this off of Wikipedia that was sent to me by somebody. He said, when Uthman made copies of the Quran, he did so according to one style, that's the harf, but he omitted the dots and the vowel points so that some other styles could also be accommodated. So talking about these dots and vowels, that Uthman omitted these dots and vowels. Now there's 2 problems with that. First problem is, there were no dots and vowels at the time of Uthman. Dots and vowels had yet to be invented. All of these dots and vowels were created because of this problem, because if you don't have dots, you can have 5 different letters, 5 different dots, 5 different sets of dots, and you can have 5 different letters, and for every word there's 3 letters, so you can have up to 19 to 33 different meanings for one word, depending on where you put the dots, and also where you put the vowels. So that would not make sense. We don't know of any reference anywhere where Uthman did not or sublimated or took off the dots and vowels. No. What he did is he was eradicated anything that disagreed in the razm, in the consonantal text. The razm is the consonantal text. This is not something that you recite. This is not oral, because then he burned those that disagree. You can't burn oral recitation. You only burn books. You earn, boy, how many times I have to say this, and yet no Muslim has come back to me on this. So he burned these dialects, these dialectical differences. Oh boy, that caused all kinds of problems. But then you see then this statement that is made here that he did this to accommodate it. No, he did not accommodate it. Why did he burn the others if he didn't want to accommodate? He wanted only the Qurayshi dialect, one set of razm, and then he sent that to 5 different cities. Now let's go back to another problem. This is the problem of the al-sabat ahruf. What do you do with this word al-sabat ahruf? The sabat ahruf is something that has caused enormous amount of consternation, and even for the speaker who was speaking there in Africa, he didn't understand this, and he says it. He's very clear. As-Suyuti enumerates 35 different interpretations. There exists a huge uncertainty regarding the term sabat ahruf. Until now, no reasonable explanation has been offered for the exact meaning of the sabat ahruf. And yet they're so concerned, yet they're so sure that there was a sabat ahruf. Sabat ahruf means 7. Could be readings, 7 words, could be harf could be letter, kaf could be word. I went up on the dictionary to look up what harf means, because ahruf means the plural of harf. And harf, I found 20 different meanings or definitions for the word harf. You can see then why no one wants to take any position on this. Yasser Qadi does take a position on this. And he makes a difference, he makes a distinction between the sabat ahruf and the Qira'at al-Sab. Now, the sabat ahruf means 7 words, 7 dialects. He says these are 7 dialects. The Qira'at al-Sab, which is 7 again, there's the word saba, which is the word 7. Qira'at would be the readings of 7. He said that these Qira'at al-Sab are the ones that were then introduced in the 8th century. So, with this guy first. You have Ibn Amir. So this is the first. This is the first of them. 736, a whole 100 years after Muhammad. He has to make that distinction because he sees the problem. You cannot have the sabat ahruf, which are the ones that Muhammad supposedly received from Jibril, before he died in 632, and you cannot confuse them with the Qira'at al-Sab, the 7 Qira'at, those 7 that Ibn Mujahid chose in 936, you cannot have that in 632. That's 300 years too early. And you cannot have it in 736, because that's 100 years too early. Are you seeing why they're in a dilemma here, and why no Muslim wants to take a position on it? So what do they say? It's a mystery. Huge uncertainty. Until now, no reasonable explanation has been offered. That's all they can say. And I'm saying, then why are you so certain that there is a Quran, that it was only one ahruf? One dialect. And how are you so certain that this was the Quraysh? Come back to that. So, I want to ask, number 8, what is the sabat ahruf? Help me here, since you guys can't understand it. Has this been going on? You've had 1,000 years to come up with that definition. Yasser Qadi had 25 years to do so, and he still couldn't do it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about those things. He tried to say, take my class. Just take my class, and then I'll explain it. What's more, the sabat ahruf, where are they today? Where are these sabat? Don't show me these, because these are not the sabat ahruf. These are the Qira'at al-Sab. These are the qira'at. There are 7 qira'ats. Those chosen by Ibn Mujahid. So don't use those. You can't use those anymore. You've got to show me where these sabat ahruf are. And you can see I'm asking a question that nobody can answer. And yet Muslims are so sure that there's no problem here. There's no problem here. Then he says that these qira'at, which were collected in Canada by Ibn Mujahid in 936, these 7, maybe the 7 were, but not the 10. And then he goes on and says, only the ignorant masses took the Sabat Ahruf of the prophetic tradition to be the 7 canonical readings. Well, no, I would suggest that almost every Muslim I've met has confused this. So be careful. I don't know if this person is quoting Shadi Nasr or is he quoting himself. But listen, these are not ignorant. Even Muslims cannot. I have yet to find a Muslim that can really define what the Al-Sabat Ahruf. What are they? Where are they? Who introduced them? Who had them? Did Uthman have them? Did Muhammad have them? Did Jibril give them to him? Because I thought Jibril, according to Al-Bukhari and also Muwatta al-Imam Malik. Now, interesting, when you talk about this, you need to go to the Muwatta of Malik. The Muwatta Malik, which was written in 796. Take a look at the date. Again, 796. I'm going to keep reminding you. 796 is the late 8th century. This comes after this. Remember, this was written, where are we here? Here we go. This is the first of the qira'ats. So when you talk about the Muwatta of Ibn Malik, you're talking about a good 60 years later. 796 is 60 years after 736. Are you following that? So the late 8th century was where you first get reference to this al-Sabat Ahruf. These 7 readings, these 7 words, these 7 dialects, whatever you want to call it, those were introduced by Muwatta Ibn Malik in the late 8th century. They did not exist in the 7th century at all. Al-Bukhari also refers to them. That's 870. Okay, 870, or that's the late 9th century. But which ones are they referring to? And this is why I love it. In some ways, I like to play the Mickey on them. Because if you're looking at Muwatta as the earliest that these are introduced, that's 60 years after Ibn Amir, and it's 163 years after Muhammad. So this whole idea of the 7 readings was introduced 163 years after Muhammad. No wonder they don't know what they're talking about. No wonder everybody's confused. No wonder that there are 35 different interpretations by Al-Suyuti alone. He didn't know what to do with it. He had 35 different ways of trying to explain it. Can you see then why Muslims are in a real dilemma today? And in order to know what the ahruf are, you have to go to the word harf. Harf. Take a look in the dictionary. Any of you, go to the dictionary and write in harf defined and look and see how many different definitions. I found 20 different definitions of the word harf, and that is the problem. So nobody knows what they're talking about because there's no way you can know it because you don't know sure which one of these definitions you're going to use. And that's what I would suggest is the problem. They want to, and they're thinking that these qira'ats must be it. I've heard so many Muslims do that, but now you need to say, no, these qira'ats have nothing to do with those 7. Those are the 7 qira'ats that Ibn Mujahid chose in 936. And that's why over and over again you get this confusion. What do the Muslims mean by qira'at and ahruf? There's my 12th problem. Qira'at are sometimes confused with ahruf, both being variants of the Quran. Variants of the Quran. This is what this teacher is saying. Variants. So he is admitting that there are variants in the Quran. Great. I'm glad he's now come alongside Yusuf Qadi and also Shabir Ali. They now agree that there are variants in the Quran. At least he's made it that. They're in Africa. They've now admitted it. And that they have 7 different varieties. However, these varieties of ahruf were continued by order of Caliph Uthman. Then I said, wait a minute. Is that a typo? The varieties of the ahruf were continued by the order of Caliph Uthman sometime in the mid-7th century when the Quran began to be read in 7 harf, in 7 variations. So now you're saying that this is the authority of Uthman. Where in the world did this person get this idea that Uthman authorized 7 different readings? If you look at Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510, book 64, if you take a look and see, this is the best tradition of how the Quran is put together. This is what every Muslim, this is the standard narrative of what every Muslim must follow. When you look and see what Al-Bukhari is saying, when Hudayfa comes down from Azerbaijan, because of the fact he hears different dialects, and he goes into the mosque and they go to fisticuffs about it, Hudayfa comes back down to Medina and confronts Uthman, the caliph, in 650, 652, and says, we cannot have so many different Qurans like the Christians and Jews have different Bibles. We must have just one Quran. we must have one Quran. So they took Zayd ibn Thabit to then rewrite the Quran in the Qurayshi dialect, so there would be no more derivations. There would be no more dialects. There would be no more of these, what we know as ahrufs, these sabat ahruf. So what in the world is this guy saying that Uthman continued, that varieties of ahruf were continued by order of that he authorized these 7 readings, and that the Quran began to be read in 7 harf. Where is he going for this? I have never heard any Muslim say this kind of thing. And I'd love to know if any Muslim would support this. Because what you're saying is, throw out al-Bukhari then. Because it's very clear that as of 652, all the other ones that disagreed with the Qurayshi dialect were then burnt. They were destroyed. And that's in black and white. And here's the picture. I'm going to put it up there. Here's the picture. Take a look. There it is right there. You can read it in the Arabic. You can read it in the English. It's there for you to look at. So this idea that he did that is completely off the wall and goes against everything that Muslims should be following. The 7 readings of the Qira'at were noted by Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid and canonized in the 8th century. Oh, dear. I don't know why this person thinks he's a scholar. When you say that they were canonized, so now he's contradicting about Uthman. Now he's going to that these were canonized. Okay, so it was canonized by Ibn Mujahid. Yes, the 7 were canonized. But in the 8th century? I mean, does he even looking at when? I mean, when did Ibn Mujahid die? 936. Is that the 8th century? No, that's the 10th century. That's 200 years later. How many times do I have to keep reminding Muslims? Would you look in the timeline and get these dates correct? And please, if you are an authority on the Qira'at, then get your dates correct on it. For heaven's sakes, he did not live in the 8th century. He did not canonize this in the 8th century. These are from the 8th century, yes. Ibn Amir is from the 8th century. Khalaf is from the 8th century. Yes, in fact, there's quite a few. All of these are from the 8th century. Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Amir, Asim, Hamza, Al-Kisai, but not Ibn Mujahid, the one who canonized him, the one that chose him. He is from the 10th century. That's 200 years too late. But that's not all. He wasn't the only one he just canonized the first 7. And then then you have 10, and that's canonized in 1429. That's the 15th century. So those first 10 are not canonized until the 15th century, and they do not include Hafs. We're going to get to that. But it just gets more and more. I have to laugh sometimes when I hear some of the statements that are put out by these Muslims who consider themselves to be authorities in this subject. I'm not an authority in this subject, and I can find error after error, fault after fault. I don't claim to be an authority. I'm just reading what Shadi Nasr is saying. I'm reading the same thing that they are reading, and I cannot understand why they're not picking up on these dates and they're not picking up on what they're saying. They're making error after error. Then he goes on and he talks about, this person talks about the irregular readings. These are the shawad, or shawad. It depends on how you want to pronounce it. And they said that the readings have to agree. In order to find what was canonical and what was irregular, shawad means irregular readings, the ones were thrown out, discarded. That's why Ibn Mujahid threw them out. Remember, there are hundreds that he threw out. He only retained 7. Ibn Mujahid, and then Shatibi then added another 14 because of 2, and he did that in a poem that he put together there in 1194. And then you have Al-Jazari, or Jazari, or however you want to put it. Some people say Jazari, some people Jazari. He then added the other 3 plus the 6 that follow them, the riwayats, the reciters, and the transmitters, and those then make it a 30 of them by the 15th century. So how did they choose those 30, and why didn't they choose the others? Well, the others were the shawad. Those were then irregular. How did they know? How did they come to which were regular and which were not irregular? Well, according to this scholar from Africa, he says the reading has to agree with the consonantal Uthmanic recension. Now, you hear Muslims throw this out all the time. They had to agree with the consonantal Uthmanic razm. Razm means consonantal text. So now suddenly they're saying the reason why they were chosen had to do with the razm. No, they did not, because the differences between them have nothing to do with razm. The differences between these 30 are all to do with dots and vowels, dots and vowels, dots and vowels. I can make it into a song. I could just do a poem on it. Please, can you hear me? I don't know how many times I've said this. This has nothing to do with the razm. If you want to talk about razm, you need to talk about this. Then you need to get back to Dan Brubaker's. We haven't even got into this material. That is the much more damaging. So be careful, because there is no razm for them to have looked at. None of these were compared to the razm, because we don't even know if these razm match the earliest razm, because no one's even looked at the earliest manuscripts to know whether those razm are all uniform. No one has done that. Why? For one very good reason. There is no Uthmanic consonantal text. 114 surahs from the time of 652. You cannot find it. It does not exist. And as much as Muslims keep saying this, just like it's almost like a mantra, that's like Yasir Qadhi's mantra. They just say it over and over again. They're not thinking how stupid it sounds. And we're not going to take it anymore. We're not that dumb. People keep on thinking that, that this, listen, you could have gotten away with that prior to this year. That's true. In 2020, most people didn't know what you were talking about. But you can't get away with that anymore after 2020. No, because we are now getting it up on the internet. And we're saying over and over again, there is no consonantal manuscript of the entire Quran, all 114 surahs from the time of Uthman that we can see today. And listen, no Muslim can show me a complete consonantal text. So how could they have used this to know what was shawad or not? How did you know which is irregular or not? There is no razm to talk about, and we're not talking about razm. Because none of these have to do with razm. They all have to do with 5 dots and 3 vowels. 5 dots and 3 vowels, all of which were invented in the 8th and 9th century. None of this existed at the time of Uthman, who lived in the mid-7th century. Are you following this? I hope this. Listen, I get tired of always repeating myself, and I sound like a broken record. But that I've got to come out and say. So, I would love to know who has done any work. From this scholar who supposedly claims to be a scholar in Africa, I would love to know who carried out this work that is done on all 30. Show me anybody that has looked at all 30 of all the 30 the 30 qira'ats and has done a work to show where the razm is exactly the same as from Uthman. Can you see why I'm saying this? I'm doing this tongue in cheek. Because there is no Uthmanic razm to begin with, and secondly, I don't know of any work that's done it. Nobody looks at that. Nobody has even cracked these books to even look and see how they're different until we did it, until the team in London did it, until the team in Australia did it. It's those two teams that have come up and just shocked the whole world. When they looked at just 23 of them in London, they came up with 93,000 differences. And nobody seemed to know this, and they've had 1,000 years to do this, and we've just all done this in the last 4 years. It's now being done as I speak. And just looking at these two right here, the team in Australia has come up with 5,000 differences between dots and vowels. No one's looking at the razm yet. That has yet to be done, because we want to look at the razm, not of these, because these are nothing more than dots and vowels. We want to look at the razm, but that has yet to be done. So don't make this crazy statement that that's how they came to know which one were these. They didn't even open the book. They didn't even look at any of the text. They chose these qira'ats. They did not choose them by their text. They chose them by popularity. The canonization that was done, the reason why Ibn Mujahid chose them was by who had the most students, who was the most popular, which lines, how many lines they had from their names that followed how many students they had, how many different readers they had, transmitters they had below them. It had to do with popularity, nothing to do with the script. So, Hafs has a sound transmission in the consensus of the Quran reciters in Mass. So that's why they chose the Hafs. And I would like to ask him, where was the consensus in Mass for the Hafs in 1924? Where was this consensus of the Mass? One man with one committee in Al-Azhar, there in Cairo, in 1924, chose Hafs. And this was decided all over the world in Mass? No, it took them up till 1985 to finally make it all over the world and make it the authority. But even today, you can still see they still exist. Why are they still here? If there has been a decision that the Hafs is the text, what happened? What about the Warsh? 3% of the Muslim world still uses the Warsh in North Africa. So you can see this has not been a canonical text that has now been signed. Now let's get to Hafs, because since we got into Hafs, I think I'd like to bring out a lot of things about Hafs. Hafs is this guy right here. This is the guy Hafs who died in the 796. So he is the late 8th century. According to what the scholar in Africa is saying, is the Mus'haf of the Quran that is in general use throughout almost all of the Muslim world today is a 1924 Egyptian edition based on the Qira'at reading of the Hafs on the authority of Asim. Asim, yes, Asim would be the reader. Asim was from Kufa, so was Hafs from Kufa. Asim died in 745. Hafs died in 796. You notice he therefore is in the stable of Asim, both from Kufa, both from Iraq, both from the place, well, I'm going to get to that they shouldn't have been from. You're going to see why as I get to it. Now, my first question. Hafs being the rawi of the transmitter, of Asim being the qira of the reader. Okay, that so far that's good. But here's my question. If it is the most authoritative, if Hafs is the most authoritative qira'at reading of the Quran, 95% of the Muslim world now has accepted that because Muhammad ibn Ali al-Husaini al-Haddad chose it in 1924. Then they had some changes. Then it was chosen for all of Egypt in 1936, called the Farouk edition. And then it was finally chosen for the whole world by King Fahd in Saudi Arabia in 1985, 35 years ago. If this was the authoritative qira'at reading of the Quran, why is it's not one of the 7? Why is it's not one of the 10? No Muslim has answered me on that. And I want to see if any of the Muslims listening can answer me. If this is the one that is chosen for the whole world today, and 95% of the Muslim world now read it, and memorize it, and read it, then why is it not part of the 7 that was chosen by Ibn Mujahid in 936, of which they were derived from 736 up until 805? 936 is when he chose those 7. The other 3 that come after that were chosen by Al-Jazari, which was in 1429, 15th century. Still, Hafs is not part of those 7 plus 3, 10. The creme de la creme, the best of the best. Hafs is not a part of those 10. Bingo, you've got a problem here. Come on, Muslims, answer me on this. And don't shy away and don't run away. The reason why is very clear. When you look at Hafs, the reason he was not chosen is because he was, I'm going to quote now, quote after quote. There are so many quotes about him from the Islamic traditions, the traditions from the 9th and 10th century. And they say that he is unreliable, that he is weak, that he was untrustworthy, he contained objectionable material, he had fabricated chains, that's isnads, he was a liar, and thus his transmissions were not recorded by others, and others avoided him. That is the reason he was not chosen by anybody before. So why in the world did Muhammad ibn al-Husaini al-Haddad choose him, and why in the world are Muslims choosing him today? Why are Muslims still choosing Hafs today? If he was that inept that even his peers living at his time rejected him in the 8th century, the late 8th century, then why in the world are you choosing him today? This person says it uses, if there's no reason why Hafs was chosen, because they're using a set of additional, because the Hafs uses a set of additional symbols and an elaborate system of modified vowel signs, and for minute details not identical to an older system. So that's why he was chosen. Well, isn't that rather odd that you would use something that has additional symbols? What additional symbols? And modified vowel signs. So in other words, he is completely different than Asim. Is that what you're telling me? Very different from those in his own stable? Asim from Kufa? Is that what you're taking me? Then why in the world would he be chosen if he's using completely different symbols and also modified vowel signs? Let's move on. Most damaging, he's from the wrong city. That has not been answered yet. He is from Kufa, which is not part of the Hijaz, which is not part of Mecca and Medina, which is not where Uthman created the canonical text. Remember, he had Zayd ibn Thabit write him a Qurayshi dialect, and he burned all the others. Kufa was one of those that was burned. It was those people in Kufa that were up there in Azerbaijan that were fighting alongside the Medinans when they came to blows because they had a different Quran. So this doesn't make sense that they would then choose the very edition that comes from the city that have been destroyed by Uthman in 652. Why would they choose it in 1924? The reason is very simple. They chose it in 1924 because the Ottomans chose it. The Ottomans, who came to power in 1299, so they came to power in the late 13th century, chose something that they loved between the 13th century and the time that they were finally thrown out in 1924. It was chosen because they chose it, and they chose it because it was easy to read, and because it was close to where they came from. We're guessing on that one. I would love to know why the Ottomans chose them, but can you see this again had to do with popularity? It's whichever one is the most popular, not which one has the best text, not which one goes back to the original text, because there is no original text for them to go back to. No wonder they didn't open the pages. No wonder they didn't read the words. No wonder they didn't read the letters. No wonder they're making the claims today that they can't support over and over and over again. I'm almost done, but can you see why I'm having to laugh? Because some of the things, the claims that these guys make, they just are off the wall. Now, we know that the 1924 Hafs edition, according to this gentleman, that it was first chosen by Muhammad ibn al-Husaini al-Haddad, and then that it was then made Egypt-wide. And he says by Fuad, no, not in Egypt, by Fuad, Farouk. Look at the dates. Again, this guy is just full of errors. Patronage of Fuad of Egypt is the one why they chose it for Egypt. No, they didn't. That was only for the city of Cairo. That was only for the high schools there in Cairo. How do I know that? Well, I use this book right here, and you can all use it. You just need to read the story. It's right here in the Quran in its historical context, and it's by Gabriel Said Reynolds. This has been out since 2008, I think. I think I'm right there, 2008. Yeah, this has been out for 12 years, folks. There's no reason why you can't read this book. Get it, read it. Look on page 2 and 3. He goes right through all this thing of how it was chosen and where they chose it and why is that when they even chose it in 1924, they then had to make correction after correction. In fact, according to him, there were 4 different lines of transmissions. That's known as turuk of Hafs himself. So there's at least 4 different Hafs. There's not just one. There's many different lines of Hafs. In fact, I understand that my good friend Hatun Tash. My good friend Hatun Tash has been able to collect 7 of them. So, so there's quite a few of these Hafs. And the reason why is because they kept on being changed. And so there was one in the beginning part of June when they first chose it. When he first chose it, then it had to be revised. So the end of June, the end of 1924, they come out with a new revised edition. And then they came out with another new revised edition of Hafs in 1936. There were changes after changes of the Hafs. So the one that was finally chosen for all of Egypt was known as the Farouk edition, because of King Farouk, who came to power in 1936. Was there in power in 1936. They had to then, they call it that. That was for all of Egypt. That was so successful, according to Gabriel Said Reynolds on page 2 of his book, that it was then chosen much later in 1985 by King Fahd there in Saudi Arabia for the whole world. So let's conclude. And this is the conclusion. I'm going to read you this character's conclusion. Listen to this conclusion. This is how he's going to end his whole talk. The whole talk. This is how he ends it. Listen to this. The readings of the Quran derive their legitimacy from the prophetic tradition of the Sabat Ahruf. However, Muslim scholars have had no common understanding of the meaning of the term harf. The mystery of the Sabat Ahruf, the 7 readings, 7 words, 7 whatever, has resulted in more than 35 different interpretations of this tradition. Nonetheless, despite the vagueness of the concept of harf, the discipline of qira'at, and the meticulous transmission of the variant readings of the Quran, we're heavily dependent on the mysterious Sabat Ahruf tradition. That's his conclusions. That's his conclusion. My goodness. Let's just read that again. This is what it comes out to. The qira'ats of the Quran get their authority from the Sabat Ahruf, which, because no one understands it, has created 35 different conclusions about it. Nonetheless, let's not worry, since the entire qira'at discipline is heavily dependent on this mysterious Sabat Ahruf, which no one understands. And that's where he leaves you. Can you then understand why no one wants to engage us with this? They don't want to engage us because they don't even know what they're talking about. They have no idea why these were chosen. They cannot have no ideas whether they were chosen, because even when Ibn Majah, when he chose the first 7 of the 30 that were then chosen by the 15th century, he had to do something because there was such a proliferation of so many different Qurans with many different derivations, with so many contradictory types of dialectical and, yes, you should say pronunciation, and yes, many different ways of saying the same thing. And so that's why he had to choose the first 7. Then, of course, our good friend Al-Shatibi then chose another 14. And then, of course, our good friend Al-Jazari chose another 9, making 30. So this whole thing with trying to make a sense of this reference to this whole thing of trying to make this reference to Sabat Ahruf, and don't confuse it with the Qira'at Sabat. both 7, and that's why they're both 7, there's the confusion. Since it's so confusing to them, they conclude it's just mystery. We just know it exists, and we know that the Quran is one. We know the Quran is one. And so when you have Muhammad Hijab finally, after 25 minutes, putting his hand out there, says, which one of these are you going to write here? Which one are you going to write in my hand? There should be only one Quran. That's what we've been told. Not one word, not one letter. There should be only one of these. We've been told us in the knee-high to the gospel, and that's what you all tell us. That's what you've driven into us. We've all believed that, and we have come to Islam because of that. And now I want you to tell me which one of those 30, please. Tell me which one of those 30, after 25 minutes, what did Yasir Qadi say? They are all the Quran. All 30 of them. You just mix them up. Put a little bit of this. Get some Hafs here. Let's get some Warsh here. Why don't we get some Kasai here? Ibn Amiyat. Oh yeah, why don't you just put them all together? Just mix them up. And what you get come with you is the Quran. All 93,000 differences is the Quran. All 93,000 differences is the Quran. My gosh, I'm so glad I don't have this problem with the Bible. I'm so glad we don't have this claim. I'm so glad we don't say the same thing. I'm so glad when we talk about this book, we don't talk about an uncreated book. We don't talk about a book that exists on eternal tablets in heaven. We don't talk about a book that has been sent down to just one man. We talk about over 30 different authors over a period from 1400 BC all the way up to the 1st century AD. 1,400 years of inspired writing by God, written, inspiring the writers, every one of them. That's why there's 4 different gospels, 4 different accounts of Jesus' ministry, of what he said and did the last 3 years of his life. 4 different ones. They don't contradict each other. They all agree of who this man Jesus was, what he did, and what he said. And we can trust it. Not because we say these have our internal tablets that not one word or letter is changed. We know where the changes are. We are very transparent about it. We never make these claims. Therefore, we don't have to defend them. And there's no mystery in this. There's no mystery of what 7 are we talking about? Are we talking about the 7 that Gabriel gave? Are we talking about the 7 that Uthman gave authority? Or are we talking about the 7 that Ibn Mujahid finally did? There are 7 here, 7 there, 7 all over the place. There's so many 7s, they don't know. They're running after 7s. Can you then understand? Thank God the Bible. We can love it, we can read it, we can apply it. It is as relevant today as the day it was written down. That's why I love the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's why we're going to end this segment with this book. This book doesn't have these problems. And I can sit there and I can not only give it to you, but ask you to open it, because it is just full of reference after reference, pointing to Jesus Christ, pointing to what he did, pointing to what he said. What a man for today. What a book for today. I give you the Bible. God bless you. This is Jay. Over and out.